Thomas Edison tried 2,000 different materials in search of a filament for the light bulb. When none worked satisfactorily, his assistant complained, "All our work is in vain. We have learned nothing." Edison replied very confidently, "Oh, we have come a long way and we have learned a lot. We now know that there are 2,000 elements which we cannot use to make a good light bulb."
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. Now, I did a video yesterday, and it was something that I've been working on for weeks with the use of AI. And, you know, as I got to the end, I trusted AI just a little bit too much, and I had looked at so much data that something as simple as Brian Koberger's name seemed to elude me. But that's okay. That's why I put out these videos, because I know people are going to go through them with a fine-tooth comb, and any errors that are made or any mistakes that are noticed, they're going to point them out. And of course you did, and I appreciate you for that. But what it's shown me is we're not on the right track. We're not on the wrong track. It's just there are many, many, many different ways you can fail, like Edison did when making a light bulb, but all that does is get the failures out of the way until you find success. And those who succeed continue looking for that success. Those who fail give up. And I'm not one of those who fail typically. So I'm going to continue looking at what I'm looking at because I've narrowed it down. That video yesterday was very accurate in a lot of sense because I'd gone through and verified the reports. So I now know exactly where to look to find the discrepancy. And a couple of other things that I do know throughout this journey is the defense team had suspicions. They didn't believe it was Brian Koberger's DNA. They believed it was manipulated in some way to get the match. They looked for it. They tried to get access to internal logs, to the actual CODIS database, to the actual ISP lab computers, and they were blocked by the judge. They wanted their IT specialist to go in and look. I think it's interesting, not only at what they did on Brian Koberger's case, but they also asked to look at the computers at other cases to see if there was a history of errors like this. And I keep those two things in the back of my mind because I find out in this case that they don't ask questions about things that aren't pertinent in some way or could be pertinent in some way. What I mean by that is when they asked to have their IT specialists look at not only this case, but other cases, it tells me that they may have been on to something. So what I want to do in this one is just go back and show you exactly where AI messed up, and I should have verified it a little bit better when they did it. But I'm also going to show you what AI didn't mess up on, what we are correct on, because we now know exactly where to focus our attention to find the true smoking gun. So it's not a total loss. It's just not over. It just means this journey is going to continue and this investigation is going to continue, and it's going to continue until we find the smoking gun. Let me show you what we got. Now, first of all, what we are not wrong on is on November 20th when they extracted the DNA, or they'd already extracted it, where they took the DNA and they manually entered it into CODIS and ran it against the CODIS database, and they did not receive a hit, but they did not create a profile through STR Mix, which is the Idaho State Police's lab's computer that processes the DNA. They did create STR Mix profiles using their database for 1.4 and other samples, but suspiciously they did not create it for the Q1.1 on the knife sheath. The other part that we are not wrong on, I've had people say, they didn't put it into CODIS, was on December 28th, Koberger's father's DNA that they pulled out of the trash, sample 87.1, they amplified it and they manually entered it into CODIS to do the paternity match. We are not wrong on that. They didn't create a STR Mix profile for Koberger's father's DNA from the trash and compare it to an STR Mix from the lab. And I think that is huge because it differentiates these two from what happened over here. And just to prove that they put Koberger's father's DNA into CODIS, unlike some people want to believe, let me show you this. I've literally had to teach myself what all of these lab reports actually mean. Report number 17, when you go through this is everything from the trash pull. 87.1 is the cutting from the Q-tip swab that had Koberger's father's DNA on it. DNA profile obtained from 87.1 was determined to be from unknown male E. That's father's DNA. Male E is not the source of DNA previously obtained from 1.1. How do they know that? As you go through, it starts with the extraction of the DNA. And look how fast they did this stuff, y'all. And I think this is important because look, December 28th is when they started. They did the extraction. 87.1 right here. Same day, they did the quantitation. 87.1 right here. Here's the batch results. DNA quantitation sheet. Same day. 87.1 right here. STR amplification setup. Same day. 87.1 right here. Now, load sheet. Same day. 87.1 right here. And then they go through with their PowerPlex Fusion panels, 87.1, their gene mapper software. From here, they would typically create an STR mix using their STR mix computer to create a full profile. That did not happen with this sample. It goes directly to the CODIS reports. And you can see unclassified for official use only by law enforcement sensitive. This is CODIS. Right here, you've got the reference sample, Q1.1, where it was manually entered from a keyboard. And you've got 87.1, where it was manually entered from the keyboard. Pop stats, CODIS. And then they go through and they run it. And you can see right here, this is being run in print off of CODIS 9.1, printed by Taylor Myshak, December 28th at 4/19/21. This is not a state lab computer. This is the CODIS database. CODIS, they keep on running it. CODIS, CODIS. Now, what happens when they keep running it? They run 3 reports, and because this is how they do it on everything, it turns out. They run things against certain population groups just to prove their point is why they do it. So you got the Caucasian group that they ran it against. They were able to exclude 99.9999033% of the Caucasian population through CODIS. Official use, unclassified, CODIS 9.0, printed by Taylor Myshak. Then they do it again, and they run it against African American, single parentage, excluded 99.9999870% of the African American population. Again, 87.1 Q.1 from the keyboards through CODIS, printed from CODIS 9.1. Then, did it one more time. Same exact things, keyboard. They ran it against the Hispanic group. This is the one that I used in the video. 99.9998595% exclusion from the Hispanic population. Printed from CODIS 9.0 by Taylor Myshak, all at the same time. And then a final report, and then that's it for the entire file. They didn't run a comparison using any other type of software, just the CODIS database. So I hope people can understand that want to keep putting in my comment section, they can't run it through CODIS, they run it through CODIS. Well, there you go. So when we get to this report, so when we get back to this, no doubt they did not produce results on an STR mix program for this one or this one. They manually entered them both through CODIS, got the parental match, which puts all the focus on what happened after the arrest of Koberger in the match over here on January the 23rd, which actually turns out is February the 3rd, as I'm going to show you. But I think it's very important to know that the documentation of what was truly in these two can't be verified outside of this report because they didn't enter this one into CODIS and they didn't create STR mixes for these two. So it all comes down to this. Now, this is where AI got things wrong. When I uploaded it, oh, by the way, no, they didn't get this wrong. When I uploaded this into the AI, they correctly pointed out the edited values that the analyst used on the STR mix on the 23rd when comparing Koberger's buccal swab to the crime scene evidence. That is a red flag. Where they did get it wrong was when I put all the reports in and I told them to try to connect Koberger to the V1.1 knife sheath sample. And it went through and it processed everything in its own mind, and it said Koberger's, it said it was Koberger was Robert Bryan, wherever the heck it did that. Maybe it was on the next page. Okay. SDR amplification. They took V1.1 and then they assumed the M was Moscow case. So this is where AI I should have verified it a little bit more. M does not mean Moscow, unlike what AI came up with. It turns out, after further research outside of AI, M means Meridian Lab. Okay. 2022-3489. This is a case number. The Koberger case is 4843. V1.1, in every case, the main sample of evidence that they have is going to be 1.1. So that's always listed as V1.1 until it becomes, questionable evidence and it turns into Q. But anyway, it took one of these samples from another case, assumed it was 1.1, and then went through and then tried to figure out how they did this stuff. And they took KRB, which stands for Krebs, some kind of Krebs, it's some word Krebs. I can't remember what it stands for. But they made it Koberger Robert Bryan, and then I guess I was just so mind fried, even though I write BCK on everything, I just didn't catch it. So this is where it went wrong. But that's okay. That still leaves us to exactly what we need to look at to figure out the discrepancy in this case. And I think we will find it. And let me show you what I'm talking about so far. So I know if we're able to uncover what truly happened, if there was manipulation of this DNA, it's going to be in this report number 26, date of evidence accepted between 12/27 and January 6, 2023. This is the report. If there is manipulation, and I suspect that there is, that we're going to find it. And there was these crime scene samples from the house, these 4 samples from Brian Koberger's apartment, his reference sample number 108 is buccal swab, and then down here you can see where they've got the reported match at 5.37 octillion to 1. It's all in this particular report. As I'm going through this report, though, not with AI, but just with my own brain and eyes, I'm already seeing the discrepancies, and they're kind of like little shining lights to me. Number one, this report has something most of the other reports doesn't have, and it's funny to me how they put everything out of order in this particular report to try to make it more difficult for you to figure things out, I believe. But it starts with the differential DNA extraction, and it's got this report in here for these samples. And what differential DNA means is these are mixtures. So they're having to unmix these mixtures. Most of the other reports just have DNA extraction. This one has differential DNA extraction, which means deconvolute the mixtures. But when I go to the sample names, now that I've realized that the M is Lab Meridian 2022 and 2023, those are the years of the crime. But the case numbers that the Idaho State Police Lab associates to those particular cases, like 4843 for Koberger, these are different case numbers. So why do they even have the report in here for the differential DNA extraction or these mixtures, and none of these are even from this case? And this is all done on January the 24th. Now we get to the regular DNA extraction, not the differential. So these aren't mixtures, or supposedly aren't mixtures, even though I know some of these are mixtures from the samples and what they found with them. As I go through this is also on January 24th. It's got some of the samples from the crime scene. Then you've got a bunch of evidence from other cases. Then you've got the samples from Koberger's apartment. And there is no 108 in here. There's no buckle swab in here. So this is January the 24th. They got Koberger's buckle swab on January the 3rd. So why isn't it in here in this DNA extraction? All right, so there's just some red flags in this stuff. So I get to this one. Again, this is the DNA extraction. Again, these are different cases, not the Koberger case, no Koberger buccal swab. This is on January 24th. Now we get to the quantitation, the load sheets, January the 25th. Remember, they did everything on Koberger's father all that same day. This is, almost a month later. And as I go through the quantitation load sheet, you see these are different case numbers, 2408. You got to go through and look for 4843. This is Koberger's apartment evidence right here. And then this is evidence from the King Road house through all of these. And then you get to other case numbers, and there's no 108. Koberger's buccal swab is not in this batch, 125. This is the batch loads for all that evidence that we just looked at. That's what these things are, is batch loads. It'll tell you somewhere in here it's a batch. But anyway, then we get to the quantitation sheet again, and it goes through all the different case numbers till you get to all the evidence from this case that was in those sheets. Then you get down here. This is evidence from Koberger's apartment, no buccal swab. January 26th, here's the PCR amplification setup. And as we go through this, again, there's no 108. But there is all the stuff from Koberger's apartment in here. And there's the other evidence from the King Road residence. And I know there's going to be a discrepancy with Q74 as we go through. And then the load sheet again, they do see that. See how there's two load sheets right here. STR amplification setup. Okay, then here's the load sheet. Q74, that's the table in Xana's room that came back to just Xana's DNA. And I know there's an issue with that. And that's why there's this additional load sheet, because re-injected for 10 seconds due to low-level data, RB to match most stringent conditions, re-injected due to ILS failure, original injection used for Q74. So there was a discrepancy with loading this particular DNA sample, and that's from Xana's table in the room. So why are there, I don't see these error reports almost in anything else, but just in this final report here. Now we're going to get down here, and on January the 20th, right? Now all this stuff was January the 23rd, 24th, 25th. Down here is January the 20th. And it is Koberger's buccal swab on January the 20th, S108. And it's in a batch with other evidence from other cases. All of this is evidence from other cases. So they did Koberger's buccal swab separate from all the other evidence they collected that has evidence to this case, and did it with some other cases for some reason. I find that interesting. DNA quantitation load sheet. You can see here's Koberger's buccal and all these other case numbers. Now, if this went through and there was no discrepancies, then I would say, okay, well then maybe everything's on the level. They just didn't want to mix Koberger's DNA with those other cases. But as we go through and look at quantitation, again, here's Koberger's buccal, all these other cases. And then where we would expect if there was nefariousness is always going to be in the STR amplification, the PCR amplification. So here is Koberger's buccal. And then we get to the load sheet. Is there another error? This is what AI found, and it just incorrectly identified who's Koberger's buccal, who the sample was from Koberger, and the other one that wasn't from this case. But it doesn't change the fact that, look at this, there's an error right here. Bad injection. They have to add dilution to this one right here. And I find it funny, and I'm not sure at this point, but I believe these columns And these columns actually mean something when they're running this program of DNA, or they're analyzing this DNA through PCR amplification. And the fact that they just happen to have the only bad injection error I've found in anything when they're running Koberger's buccal swab. And if you look in this column, number 9, this is where the error is on this sample 1268 from another case, case number 1268. And then up here in this column, this is where the dilution error comes in, and they have to add dilution to this case number 0496. And I just happened to draw lines through these columns, and both of them intersect this particular column, which is Koberger's buccal swab at S108. I'm not sure what it means yet, but I'm going to keep digging until I find it. But let me know your thoughts on this one. Now, I'm not going to jump to conclusions like I did in the video yesterday and trust AI quite as much as I did, but I do have a knack, it seems, for hearing things that are just, that doesn't quite seem as important at the time, but could be important, and then later on having them pop up in my mind as I'm looking at other things. So having the defense clearly want to not only get their IT specialists to look at the computers for background logs to show discrepancies, not only on this case, but they also literally said they want to look at other cases as well. And then when I dive in and I look at Brian Koberger's buccal swab, and it's not with the other evidence in the case, it's with evidence from many other cases all on its own. And then I get to the STR amplification, which would be the place where manipulation would occur, which would also correlate to those settings that the Idaho lab personnel modified in the STR mix program, because that's where this comes into play. I just can't help but correlate things when I see a bad injection error and they have to add dilution to something else, and they both intersect Brian Koberger's buccal swab column, and they're from other cases. I don't know what all of that means, if it means anything or not, but I do know if there is a discrepancy in this case, it happened in this final batch of reports where they did the match from Koberger to the original sample. And I'm quite certain that it's going to be there because they didn't print the STR mix program from November 20th. They manually entered things into CODIS on November 20th. They manually entered Koberger's father's DNA into CODIS on the 28th. So this is the first time STR mix has even come into play as far as verifying DNA and matches from that original knife sheath sample. So I am going to pick fly shit out of black pepper until I find the smoking gun in this thing, because I think this report right now is smoking. Please let me know your thoughts. Like and subscribe, and if I've missed anything or I point out anything wrong, that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear, because I want to get it fixed, because I'm going to get that light bulb to light in this thing.